And I'm really excited to introduce our next presenter, who is a newish staff person to Grey County. Linda Swanston came to the county to take the newly minted position of Manager of Climate Change Initiatives, and she has been working for the last several months on the county's climate change action plan, which is literally being released to the public today. So I am going to let Linda tell you all about it rather than steal her thunder. Welcome, Linda, to Ag 4.0.
Thank you so much, Billy, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. I think you'll see on the first slide that I'd like to talk about agriculture and climate action. And I think something I've really enjoyed about the program so far is it's been not so much just agriculture and our changing climate, but agriculture and what actions are really within the agricultural community's purview and control to be a really critical part of the solutions to the climate crisis that we're all facing. So the presentation I'm going to share with you is very much locally focused on Grey County. So if you live in Grey County, that's great. It's directly applicable to you. But if you don't live in Grey County, you can think of it as how a rural, smaller size county or jurisdiction is starting to think more about how agriculture can be part of our climate solutions. And certainly of all the folks who are speaking with you today, I am by no means, I am not the person who is going to be able to speak to the specifics of what are the best crop rotations or pasture management approaches to optimize your sequestration of carbon, but rather what I'd like to share is how that work can fit into municipal and county level climate action planning. And so what you see on this slide is a vision statement that, as Philly mentioned, will be being released today publicly in terms of where the County of Grey is hoping to go in terms of climate action. And what you can see sort of in the middle of the slide is that we're hoping to embrace energy conservation, innovative and nature-based solutions. And so we really see a critical role for nature-based and agricultural solutions in the response to our changing climate. Now, as I said, or as Philly mentioned, I'm relatively new to the county and I came from the city of Toronto. So while I did spend, a bit of time in my early 20s as part of the worldwide opportunities on organic farms, sort of, doing this and that, helping out in a volunteer capacity as sort of an interesting and affordable way to travel. After that, I really kind of settled into about 10 years working in urban climate action, and that's my area of expertise. And so this slide is really for the I guess the geeks amongst us, and it shows how greenhouse gas emissions are counted. This is from the Global Protocol on Community Scale Greenhouse Gas Emission Inventories, and it illustrates what is counted and what is, I guess, considered out of scope. And so what you see is that Scope 1 emissions are really about the geography that the emissions come from. So for a place like Grey County or any rural jurisdiction that has a significant amount of agriculture, if there's agricultural happening and food products being produced that are then being consumed elsewhere, in Grey County's case, those emissions are counted to Grey County. So we're really sort of being held responsible or sort of thinking of our carbon output or our emissions output as something that's connected to goods or services being consumed in other places. On the flip side, the emissions associated with the electronics we use or the cars that we drive that are manufactured overseas are not counted as part of Grey County's inventory. So using this approach and looking only at the geographically local greenhouse gas emissions, we produced an initial greenhouse gas inventory for the county. And I've joked before that, this slide never makes me very popular in these kind of settings, because what you see is that in our initial analysis, agriculture was the largest source of local greenhouse gas emissions. So, when you think about the population of Grey County, which is about 100,000 people, and the number of ruminant animals, which is about 200,000. It's not entirely surprising that agriculture is a big part of our emissions picture, but we knew we needed to dive a bit deeper. And so we took this initial analysis and really tried to have conversations with our agri-food sector. As I said, this is a newer area in municipal greenhouse gas inventorying. We're very good at counting cars and natural gas in buildings, but trying to understand the role of agriculture in our emissions picture is something that's certainly an emerging science. So we took those initial results and we did a survey specifically to the agricultural sector. We met with critical local stakeholders, the Ontario Farmers Association, Alternative Land Use Services, who you saw a video for earlier. And then we've also worked very closely with a local agricultural organization, Grey Ag Services, that supports our local producers in capacity building. And we heard from all these folks that when they saw that initial image, it didn't quite sit right. They didn't feel that it necessarily was a useful representation of agriculture's role in our emissions, that it sort of suggested that agriculture was a problem, when really what we've heard so far today is that agriculture has a huge opportunity to be a big part of the solution. What we heard in the survey also was that climate change was an important issue to our agricultural community. Over 80% were concerned to some degree about how climate change would impact their farms in terms of our agricultural survey respondents. And even more interestingly, but unsurprisingly, over 90% of respondents felt that they were somewhat or very familiar with with farm management practices to increase carbon sequestration. Admittedly, this was a self-selected survey, so this wasn't necessarily a representative sample, but I think it speaks to the fact that there are many farmers in Grey County and likely elsewhere who are already thinking about how climate change, as we heard from the new farm, how agriculture and farming can be part of the response to climate change. So one of the overall recommendations that came out of some of our public engagement was that in the county's plan, it was essential that we recognize that agriculture is a critical element of Grey County's culture and economy, and that we should be supporting and enhancing the agri-food sector's existing efforts to address climate change. So, don't reinvent the wheel, that the county shouldn't be sort of looking to start from scratch, but rather recognizing how much great work is already happening from organizations looking at sustainable or regenerative agriculture and looking for ways to support that work. So one of the other things we did was, based on the feedback we heard, take a different approach to analyzing our greenhouse gas emissions. And when Philly said this is being released right now, you're getting a bit of a sneak peek, as this is not out in the public realm quite yet. But basically, because greenhouse gas emissions from burning fossil fuel really require different responses than the greenhouse gas emissions associated with agriculture, we separated the two. To really help us understand the relative opportunities, and also to recognize, as we've talked about, that agriculture is both a source of emissions, but can be a sink. And so really needing to understand the emissions picture there, independently of the emissions that we know we just need to eliminate or seek to eliminate from things like fossil fuel combustion in vehicles, or use to heat our homes or build our businesses. So again, this precise details and numbers on these pie charts is not really the point of this slide, but rather to show that overall, biogenic or nature-based emissions in Grey County are just under half of the overall fossil fuels. And so certainly a major area of opportunity is how we're thinking about it. And as a number of speakers have already mentioned, this is not an opportunity that is only being recognized in Grey County. The Greenbelt just this week released a report, The Power of Soil, which really centers the importance of stewardship of the soil from a carbon and climate resilience, or carbon sequestration and climate resilience perspective. There's also a number of farmers who are able to commit to soil sequestration programs, may be eligible to sell credits on the voluntary or eventually the compliance markets. And I know you'll be hearing more about that as we go through the day. And then to tee up, I hope the next presenters of the morning from the Nuclear Innovation Institute, that kind of offsetting and sequestration connections are also being championed locally by the Carbon Offset Coalition, which I know you'll be hearing more about. So as we heard from the new farm, there can be revenue opportunities from the price premium that may be available to farmers from regenerative organic agriculture, but there may also be revenue opportunities from the carbon offset markets that are emerging. So we took this perspective that we'd heard championed from agriculture to say, let's make sure that we're seeing the opportunities of agriculture as a solution, not just a source of emissions. And again, this is a bit of a sneak peek, but what we saw through our analysis locally is that regenerative agriculture, so that this sort of the largest brown wedge here, has one of the greatest greenhouse gas emission potentials of all possible climate actions locally. To put it in relative perspective, the yellow is the switch from our combustion engines to electric vehicles. So we really see agriculture as a critical part of the climate response in Grey County. There's a number of actions that are being recommended in the county's climate plan that really support ongoing capacity building, the promotion of local food, and exploration around biogas as a source of alternative energy. And I'll leave you just with this image of a local solar farm in Southgate that combines ground-mounted solar panels with sheep pasturing. And it's really a symbiotic relationship in that the solar panels provide shade for sheep during the hotter months. And the sheep actually act as a bit of a lawnmower. They're just the right height to be able to eat the grass around the solar panels and optimize their functioning. So I think sometimes there's a bit of a sense that there's a tension or a competition between land use options around renewable energy and agriculture. And with creativity, it's certainly possible for those two things to be mutually supportive. So I thank you all for your time, and I encourage you, if you're in Grey County, to get involved in the county's climate action work. And if you're not, certainly an opportunity perhaps to speak to your local councils and representatives about the opportunities for agriculture in climate action. So thanks very much, and I'll hand it back to Philly.
Thank you, Linda. Very exciting to have you here on CCAP release day, and thanks for all the work that you've done to reach out to the agricultural community and really capture those voices as a way of creating positive change for the future.